The Fateful. Exploration, pushing the limits of what humanity could achieve with his companies. But the depth of knowledge this man was speaking of hit him like a wave. Could someone living on the streets truly understand the complexities of the universe? Elon paused, searching for words. I didn't expect to find a physics expert in a place like this. The man chuckled softly, his smile somewhat bittersweet. Yeah, I get that a lot. Most people think I'm just another lost soul. But the universe, it's always been there for me, even when society wasn't. The bustling streets of Los Angeles felt far away as Elon settled beside the man. Their conversation shifted, and for the first time in a long while, Elon felt an odd sense of calm. It was as if the rest of the world had stopped moving, and only the two of them existed in that moment. The book the man was reading wasn't just any textbook. It was filled with complex equations, theoretical discussions about string theory, quantum mechanics, and the possibility of multiple dimensions. Each page seemed to pull Elon deeper into a world where reality, as he knew it, was just the beginning. You really understand this stuff? Elon asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. I mean, I've read about these theories, but they seem so far from the real world. The man nodded. Most people can't see the connections, Elon, but I spent years studying at NASA. I was on a team that was researching the very ideas that the world isn't ready to face. I was close to proving it, close to cracking the secret to understanding multiple dimensions. Elon's brow furrowed. But if you were doing groundbreaking work, why are you out here? He gestured to the street, the harsh reality of the situation settling in. The man, who introduced himself as Henry, looked down at his hands, which were calloused and worn, the skin cracked from years of exposure to the elements. I made a choice, Henry said slowly. A choice to not lie, not hide the truth. And for that, I paid the price. Elon was quiet for a moment, letting the weight of Henry's words sink in. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to unraveling the mysteries of the universe, only to be discarded because his findings didn't fit the narrative that the scientific establishment was willing to support. It was a bitter truth that Elon too had encountered in his career. Innovation often clashed with the status quo. As the conversation deepened, Elon found himself more and more captivated by Henry's words. What began as a casual exchange about a strange book had quickly turned into a complex discussion of theories that seemed to stretch the very fabric of reality. Despite his usual confidence in understanding even the most advanced concepts, Elon now felt like a student, struggling to grasp the scale of what Henry was describing. Henry, with his hands clasped together, leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and patient. "You see, Elon, everything we know about the universe, the physical laws, the constants, the space-time fabric, is just one layer of reality. There's an entire other layer, parallel to ours. Think of it like a shadow. It's there, but we can't see it. Not yet." Elon shifted uncomfortably, absorbing Henry's words. "So you're telling me that there are entire universes running parallel to ours, and we just can't see them?" he asked skeptically. The idea seemed absurd, even to him, someone who had done the impossible by sending rockets to space. The concept of parallel universes had always felt like science fiction, a far-off idea that hadn't yet been proven. Henry nodded. "Exactly. And if we can find the right frequencies, the right connections, we could access them. All these universes, interacting, affecting each other, and yet completely independent." The thought was mind-boggling. Elon's rational mind, the one that had built Tesla and SpaceX on logic and proven science, tried to dissect the idea. "But how is that even possible?" he asked, a sense of doubt creeping into his voice. "There's no technology that could allow us to even detect such things, let alone travel to another dimension. It's not just about finding evidence, it's about having the tools, the means." Henry's eyes narrowed with a spark of something intense. "That's where we're wrong, Elon. We have the technology already. We just need to understand how to use it. I was working on it at NASA before they shut me down. There are signals in the quantum field, tiny fluctuations in the fabric of space that we've just barely begun to observe. These aren't just irregularities, they're the echoes of parallel realities." Elon's skepticism pushed back hard. "Quantum fluctuations," he repeated, almost mockingly. "You're asking me to believe that the answer to accessing other dimensions lies in quantum mechanics, a theory that's still being debated in labs around the world? Henry, this sounds like the stuff of science fiction. It's just not practical." Henry's expression remained calm, but there was a fire behind his words. "It's practical, Elon. We've been blind to it for too long. Science has always been about pushing boundaries. The problem is we've built walls around what we believe is possible. I'm telling you that we've only scratched the surface. The evidence is right in front of us. We just need the right mindset." Elon rubbed his forehead, feeling the pressure of the conversation weigh on him. As a person who had built his empire on challenging conventional wisdom, the idea of parallel universes intrigued him. But how could he accept this without proof? How could he invest in something so abstract? "I want to believe you, Henry," Elon said, his voice more measured now. "But how do we even begin? How do we prove this isn't just theory or worse, delusion?" Henry's face softened slightly, sensing Elon's genuine concern. "I understand why you're skeptical. But think about it. NASA wasn't ready to accept the idea because it threatened everything they knew. The truth, the real truth, often gets buried when it doesn't fit the accepted narrative. What I discovered wasn't just theoretical. I had empirical data, but I was told to falsify it, to hide the evidence. I couldn't do that." Elon leaned back, his mind racing. The weight of what Henry was saying was heavy. He had heard of the bureaucratic failures in science, the cases where new, groundbreaking theories had been discarded simply because they didn't fit into the established paradigm. Was this just another case of a brilliant mind being pushed aside? Or was Henry's discovery truly something that could rewrite science? "So, you're telling me," Elon said slowly, "that you had data, real, verifiable data, that could have changed everything, and you were silenced. NASA just pushed it all aside?" Henry nodded. "Yes, it was a project they wanted to keep under wraps. I found the connection between quantum fluctuations and alternate realities. I proved it, but they didn't want the world to know. Too much power, too much uncertainty." Elon absorbed the enormity of what Henry was saying. A part of him couldn't help but feel anger, not at Henry, but at the system that had pushed him out. The idea that someone with such a deep understanding of the universe could be silenced, it didn't sit well with Elon. He had faced similar resistance throughout his career when challenging established industries, but this felt different. This was about knowledge, about understanding reality on a fundamental level. "What happened to the data?" Elon asked, his tone turning serious. "Do you still have it?" Henry's expression hardened. "Yes. I kept everything. I couldn't let it go. They may have pushed me out, but they didn't take everything from me." Elon's mind was spinning now, the possibilities unfolding in front of him. He had always been driven by a desire to push humanity forward, to take the impossible and make it real. Could this be the next frontier? Was this the breakthrough he had been waiting for? The one that could change everything about how humanity understood the universe? Henry's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I've been waiting for someone who can see the truth in what I'm saying. I've been waiting for the right person to help me bring this knowledge to the world." Elon's eyes narrowed, his decision beginning to form. "You know, Henry, a lot of people would dismiss you as crazy for even suggesting something like this, but I'm not one of them." For the first time, Henry smiled, almost shyly. "I didn't think you would be, but even if you believe me, it's not enough. This requires more than just faith. It requires action. It requires resources, people, technology that can look beyond the walls of our understanding." Elon stood up, the weight of the decision settling over him. He had faced numerous challenges throughout his career, but this was something else entirely. The possibility of discovering a new frontier in science, something so vast, so unprecedented, was beyond anything he had ever worked on. It wasn't just about creating a company or building a product. This was about altering the course of human knowledge itself. "All right," Elon said, his voice resolute. "I'll help you. We'll do this, but we need to prove it. We need to show the world that what you're saying is not just a dream. We're going to make this a reality." Henry's words hung in the air between them. Elon's mind, still processing the vastness of the ideas Henry had just shared, began to race. The room around them, once filled with the hum of city traffic and ambient noise, now seemed to fade into nothingness. The only sound that remained was the low murmur of their voices and the soft rustling of Henry's weathered notebook as he flipped through pages filled with complex, theoretical physics. Henry paused for a moment, his hands shaking slightly as he turned the page of his notebook. "I was working on something big, Elon. Something that could change everything. But NASA wasn't ready for it, and neither was I." Elon watched him carefully, sensing the deep internal struggle Henry was facing. This wasn't just a man who had been wronged. It was someone whose very identity and life had been shaped by his pursuit of something greater. But there was a pain in his eyes, a grief that stemmed from being silenced, discarded by the institution he had once been part of. "What do you mean, not ready?" Elon asked, trying to understand the weight of Henry's words. "You found something real, and they ignored it. Why?" Henry looked up at him, his eyes distant for a moment. "It wasn't that they ignored it. They didn't want to understand it. I wasn't just working with equations and theories. I was working with the fabric of reality itself, Elon. What I discovered? I can't even explain it the way I wish I could. It was like touching something bigger than us, something no one was willing to face. Elon's mind whirled, but he had to press for more. So, you discovered the multiverse? The theory of parallel universes? How could you prove that? What did you find? Henry took a deep breath. His voice dropped lower, as though he were about to tell a secret he'd been holding for far too long. I found a way to measure the anomalies in the quantum field. These fluctuations in the space-time continuum, they weren't just random. They were echoes, ripples from parallel realities, realities that exist right alongside ours, influencing what happens here. But the results weren't just theoretical, Elon. I observed it. I felt it. Elon leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Henry's face. The man before him was speaking with a certainty and passion that seemed almost out of place for someone who had been cast aside by society. And yet, every word rang with a resonance that felt true, even as it defied everything Elon had ever learned about physics. I don't understand, Elon admitted, his voice trembling slightly, betraying his growing sense of awe. If what you say is real, then why hasn't anyone else seen this? Why hasn't it been published? Why isn't this mainstream science? Henry smiled faintly, almost bitterly. Because the establishment doesn't want to challenge the status quo. It's easier to dismiss a radical theory than to face a reality that could shatter everything we know about the universe. But it's there, right in front of us. Elon took a step back, his mind processing the information, trying to find a logical framework to place it in. So, you're saying that these parallel universes are connected to our own, that they overlap, interact with us, in ways we don't fully understand? Henry nodded. Exactly, and not just in terms of physics. If you understand the fluctuations, those quantum anomalies, you begin to realize that they're not just random. They're messages, signals from other dimensions. Some of them are purposeful, others chaotic, but they're all linked. Elon felt his heart race. This was no longer just a conversation about theories. This was a revelation, a breakthrough. Could it really be possible that there were other realities existing alongside theirs, unseen yet interwoven with the very fabric of their world? Henry, Elon said slowly, the words catching in his throat. Are you telling me that if we understand how to interpret these anomalies, we could access other dimensions? We could cross into them? Like traveling between worlds? Henry looked directly into Elon's eyes, his face intense, almost pleading. Yes, and not just travel. We could communicate. We could gain knowledge, energy, resources that we can't even fathom right now. These universes are linked in ways we've barely begun to grasp. If we can access that connection, we can revolutionize everything: energy, technology, even space travel. Elon felt a mix of disbelief and wonder. It was as if the door to an entirely new realm of possibility had just been opened in front of him, and he was staring at it with both awe and trepidation. But why didn't you prove this before? I mean, this could change everything, Elon asked, his voice filled with both excitement and confusion. Henry's face darkened again, the weight of past betrayals evident in his expression. I tried. Hadn't just been discarded for his ideas. He had been cast aside because his discoveries threatened the very structure of the institutions that controlled scientific knowledge. The idea that someone like Henry could uncover something so monumental, yet be silenced, shook Elon to his core. "How did you prove it, Henry?" Elon asked, his curiosity now bordering on obsession. "How did you measure these anomalies? How did you observe them?" Henry's eyes lit up again as he spoke about the work he had done, the instruments he had used, advanced quantum detectors, gravitational wave monitors, and complex simulations that had provided the first hints of something extraordinary. He described his attempts to create a machine capable of measuring these quantum fluctuations directly, to open a doorway between dimensions. But despite the promising results, the project had been shut down. The data was dismissed, the results buried. "You've seen it yourself. This isn't just theory anymore, Elon," Henry said, his voice full of conviction. "If you believe in science, real science, you'll see what I see." Elon took a step back, feeling the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. This was no longer just an academic discussion. It was real. This could change everything. For someone who had spent his life looking for the next big breakthrough in technology and space, this was the kind of challenge Elon thrived on. But the implications were vast, beyond what he had ever imagined. His mind raced with possibilities, his heart quickening. This was the kind of idea he had been waiting for, a paradigm shift in human understanding. But at the same time, the dangers, the uncertainties, and the risks were immense. If Henry was right, if they could prove this, the world would never be the same. The weight of the conversation was now fully upon Elon, and the air between him and Henry felt charged with possibility. What Henry had said, what he had revealed, was too extraordinary to ignore, but also too dangerous to embrace without reservation. Elon stood up, walking a few paces away from Henry, his mind racing, trying to process the magnitude of it all. His thoughts swirled with questions, possibilities, and doubts. Could Henry really be right? Could the universe truly be a multidimensional web, with countless realities existing parallel to their own, all interconnected in ways they could barely comprehend? Was there a way to access these parallel universes, to travel between them, to understand them, and perhaps to harness their knowledge and resources? Elon had always prided himself on pushing the boundaries of technology, first with electric cars, then with reusable rockets. But this was an entirely new frontier. This was not about innovation in the traditional sense. It was about cracking open the very fabric of the universe itself. If it was true, it could change humanity's place in the cosmos, but the risks were enormous. What if they were wrong? What if they accidentally opened a door to something they couldn't control? As Elon paced, Henry watched him quietly, understanding the internal conflict that was playing out in Elon's mind. Henry knew this was a lot to ask, to believe, to accept, but he also knew, with a certainty that was unshakable, that what he had discovered was the key to the next great leap in human progress. If they could make this real, if they could unlock the secrets of the multiverse, it would be the greatest discovery in human history. It could solve energy crises, revolutionize technology, and open the door to exploring realms of space they had only dreamed of. "Elon," Henry said, his voice low, breaking the silence. "I know this is hard to believe. I know it sounds impossible, but I'm asking you as someone who has spent his life pushing me to believe in something that's never been proven. It's too big, too dangerous." We're talking about altering the very fabric of reality. How do we even start? Henry took a step forward, his eyes unwavering. We start by acknowledging that what we've been told is not all there is. The universe is far bigger than our limited understanding. If we keep following the same path, we'll never break through the boundaries of space and time. But if we take this leap, if we dare to explore what's beyond, we could change everything. Elon closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on him. The rational part of his brain screamed for caution. It was too risky, too unknown. But then, there was the part of him that had always been driven by curiosity and a desire to explore the uncharted. The part that had built rockets to go to Mars, that had dreamed of a world where electric cars were the norm, and that had never settled for the status quo. That part of him was still alive, and it was pushing him toward Henry's vision. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking with Henry's. "What do you need from me, Henry? If we're going to do this, if we're going to make it work, we need to act fast. We can't waste time." Henry smiled, a small but powerful expression of relief. "I need resources, Elon. I need your team, your technology. We have to start building the right equipment, the right tools. We'll need advanced quantum computers, specialized detectors, everything we can use to measure the fluctuations in the quantum field. It's not just about building a machine. It's about understanding how to tap into the energy of the multiverse itself." Elon's mind was already turning, calculating the possibilities. SpaceX, Tesla, his empire of technological innovation, could provide the resources to make this work. But it would take more than just financial backing. They would need the brightest minds, the best engineers, and a new approach to science itself. This wouldn't be easy, and the scientific community would likely resist, but the stakes were too high to ignore. "All right," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "We'll do this. I'll back you. We'll get the resources we need, and we'll prove it. We'll show the world that what you discovered isn't a fantasy. It's reality." Henry's eyes widened slightly, the weight of the decision sinking in. He had been waiting for someone who would believe in him, someone who would stand with him. Elon Musk was that person. In that moment, it felt like everything had come full circle, from the scientist who had been cast aside to the visionary who now stood on the cusp of revolutionizing humanity's understanding of the universe. Elon paused, his mind still racing with the implications. "But Henry, there's one thing I need to understand. What exactly do you think will happen once we prove this? If we manage to open a door to these other dimensions, what comes next?" Henry's expression shifted to one of quiet intensity. "Once we open the door, once we unlock the secrets of the multiverse, the possibilities are endless. We could access new forms of energy, knowledge that has been hidden for eons. We could communicate with other forms of life, beings from parallel dimensions who have already achieved what we only dream of. But it's not just about the technology. It's about understanding our place in the universe, about realizing that we are not isolated, we are connected to something much greater." Elon stood still, taking in Henry's words. The enormity of what they were about to undertake was overwhelming, and yet he felt the pull of destiny. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for his entire life, not just to revolutionize technology or space travel, but to change humanity's understanding of existence itself. "Let's do it," Elon said finally, the decision clear in his mind. "We'll make this happen. We'll take humanity into the unknown." Henry nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of isolation lift from his shoulders. With Elon by his side, he knew that they could achieve what others thought impossible. Together, they would unlock the door to the multiverse and change the course of human history. The weight of Elon's decision settled in the air between them. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Elon felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another business venture, another project. This was something bigger. It felt as though they were standing on the precipice of a discovery that could shift the very foundation of human knowledge. But the stakes were high. They could be wrong. They could fail. And if they did, the consequences would be unthinkable. Henry, standing beside Elon, had his own internal conflict. Though the offer was a dream come true, a chance to finally bring his findings to light, it came with its own set of risks. The years of being rejected by society, the sting of being silenced by NASA, lingered in his chest. He had once believed that humanity wasn't ready for what he had discovered, but now, with Elon's support, there was hope. Real hope. But even that hope was laced with a sense of fear. What if they succeeded, but it was too much? What if the multiverse they were about to uncover was more than they could control? I never thought this day would come, Henry said, his voice almost a whisper. After all these years of being discarded, I didn't think anyone would believe me. But now you're telling me, we're going to do this? Elon turned to Henry, his expression firm, but there was a trace of empathy in his eyes. We'll do it. Together, he said, his voice resolute. This isn't just about you or me. It's about changing the future of humanity. We have a chance here to prove something that could take us beyond what we've ever dreamed. The sense of purpose in Elon's voice resonated with Henry. He could see the sincerity in Elon's eyes, the determination that mirrored his own thirst for discovery. Elon had always been driven by big ideas, ideas that had already changed the world. But this was different. This wasn't just about reaching Mars or building electric cars. This was about redefining reality itself. Henry exhaled slowly, as if releasing the weight of years of isolation. You know what this means, right? We'll be risking everything. If we're right, we might unlock knowledge that could alter the entire course of humanity. But if we're wrong, we could unleash something we can't control. Once we start down this path, there's no turning back. Elon nodded. He understood the gravity of the situation, the immense risks. But that was what made it worth pursuing. I know, but we've always had to take risks to change the world. If we don't, if we play it safe, we'll never know what we're capable of. And I'm willing to bet everything on this, Henry. I'm in. Henry's gaze softened. He could see that Elon was no longer just offering to help him. Elon had fully embraced the idea, the mission, as his own. It was no longer just about one person's dream. It was a shared vision. Henry felt a stirring in his chest, perhaps the first true sense of belonging in years. He wasn't alone anymore. Someone who understood, someone who had the means to make it happen, was standing beside him. This will take more than just us, Henry said, his voice growing more confident as he spoke. We'll need the best minds, the best equipment. The technology is there, but we need a team. We need the resources to make it real. Elon placed a hand on Henry's shoulder, his grip firm, reassuring. I'll make it happen. I know the people. I have the resources. You don't have to worry about that. We'll get everything we need. The two men stood in silence for a moment, looking at each other. They both understood that this was the beginning of something that could change everything. What had started as a chance meeting on a city sidewalk had now transformed into an alliance, a partnership that would push the boundaries of science and human understanding. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, obstacles, and risks, but it was a path that promised discovery, and Elon was ready to walk it with Henry. As the conversation died down, Elon turned back to the car and retrieved his phone. He immediately began making calls to his team at SpaceX. He had a plan, and he needed to start setting it into motion. He could already hear the objections, the skepticism. The scientific community would fight this. They would call it nonsense, dismiss it as another pipe dream. But Elon didn't care. He had built companies on impossible dreams before, and he was willing to do it again. Henry watched as Elon made the calls, his voice filled with authority, his face a picture of focus. It was clear that this was no longer just another project. It was a mission, and Henry would be at the center of it, guiding Elon and his team into unknown territory. "Get them on board," Henry said quietly, more to himself than to Elon. "Get them to see the truth." Elon turned back to Henry, a small smile playing on his lips. "They will. Once we have the data, once we have the evidence, they won't be able to deny it. No one can ignore facts. And this is something the world can't ignore." The trial and groundbreaking discovery. Elon Musk woke up to an unusually quiet morning, the kind that felt like a pause before something monumental. The world outside his window hummed with the regular rhythm of daily life. People rushing to work, cars honking in the distance, and the occasional siren in the background. But inside, Elon felt an unease that had been creeping up on him since his meeting with Henry the day before. As he sipped his coffee, his mind was flooded with thoughts of what Henry had said. The impossible theories, the radical ideas about parallel universes, and the undeniable conviction in Henry's voice. They had all planted seeds of doubt and curiosity in Elon's mind. For someone who had pushed the boundaries of technology and science with Tesla and SpaceX, this felt like something new, something deeper. This wasn't just about building the next great rocket or electric car. It was about cracking open the very foundation of reality itself. But as he stood up and walked toward his desk, the weight of the conversation from yesterday seemed to linger. Could they really prove the existence of parallel universes? Could they actually tap into this web of alternate realities that Henry had spoken of? Elon had heard of theories like this before. Multiverses, alternate dimensions, quantum fluctuations. But they were always theoretical. Always something that belonged in the realm of science fiction. Something that couldn't be truly tested or explored with the technology at hand. Or so he thought. His assistant knocked lightly on the door and stepped into the room, interrupting his thoughts. She handed him a file, her eyes filled with curiosity and concern. "Mr. Musk, we've got some unusual readings from Henry's research. We've been tracking some of the anomalies he identified and, well, you need to see this." Her voice was tinged with an odd sense of urgency. Elon took the file, already sensing that the events of yesterday were far from over. As he scanned through the data, his heart rate picked up. The quantum fluctuations that Henry had identified, the ones they'd written off as anomalies in the system, had intensified overnight. It wasn't just a small increase. The numbers were staggering. For the first time, the data seemed to follow a pattern, something that felt deliberate, something too significant to be a coincidence. "Is this a mistake?" Elon asked, looking up from the papers and meeting his assistant's gaze. "We're not sure," she said. "We ran the tests multiple times, cross-referenced the data. The readings are consistent. There's something happening, and it doesn't fit into any of our existing models." This could be what Henry was talking about. Elon's mind raced. The idea that this could be a breakthrough in his hands was both thrilling and terrifying. Could this be the moment that changed everything? Could Henry's theory of parallel universes be more than just an eccentric scientist's ramblings? "Set up a meeting with Henry." "Now," Elon instructed, his voice calm, but there was an unmistakable edge of excitement in it. As he paced the room, waiting for the meeting to be arranged, his mind raced through the possibilities. Elon had spent years in the world of the impossible, landing rockets, making electric cars a reality. sending astronauts to space. But this was something that could shatter the very foundations of physics, something that no one had dared to fully explore. A new frontier, a discovery beyond technology, beyond anything humanity had ever conceived. Could he really be on the brink of changing everything? If what Henry said was true, they were standing at the threshold of an entirely new understanding of the universe. But with that came uncertainty, the kind that had always accompanied the greatest discoveries in history. The knock on the door broke his thoughts once more. His assistant returned, looking more anxious than before. "Mr. Musk, Henry's ready to meet. He's on his way here." Elon's pulse quickened. He looked at the file once more, the words and numbers swimming in front of him. The decision they were about to make would affect not just them, but the entire world. "Let's do it," he said, his voice low, almost to himself. "Let's see where this leads." As he left his office and headed toward the conference room, Elon's mind was filled with one thought. This was it. The next great leap for humanity. Whatever lay ahead, it would be more than just another scientific discovery. It would change the course of history. He just had to trust that they were ready for it. The mood in the conference room was charged with a strange mix of anticipation and skepticism. It had been days since Elon's decision to move forward with Henry's research, and now, the reality of what that meant was beginning to take hold. Elon had called together his top team of engineers, scientists, and key members of SpaceX to evaluate the data that Henry had presented. There were murmurs of excitement, but there was also an unmistakable undertone of doubt. After all, Henry was not exactly a conventional scientist. The idea that a homeless man, someone with no formal credentials, had discovered something that could fundamentally alter their understanding of the universe seemed, to many, like a stretch too far. Elon entered the room, his usual confidence tempered by the gravity of the situation. The sleek, minimalist conference table was surrounded by the best minds in the business, people who had spent their careers working on rockets, spacecraft, and the outer limits of technology. They were well versed in the impossible, but even they could not deny that the task ahead of them felt different. It wasn't just about breaking barriers in technology anymore. This was about breaking barriers in understanding the very nature of reality itself. The room, usually buzzing with excitement about new innovations, was silent as Elon took his seat. He studied the faces around him, some of them hopeful, others uncertain, a few downright skeptical. His assistant, the same one who had brought the news of Henry's data, stood quietly at the back, ready to assist as needed. The giant screens at the front of the room flickered to life, showing the data that had been carefully compiled and analyzed over the past few days. "Let's get started," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. His eyes scanned the team. "Henry has shown us some extraordinary results. I know many of you are skeptical, but I need everyone here to put that aside and look at the facts." He nodded toward Henry, who had been sitting quietly at the table, his weathered face betraying little emotion. Henry had been silent since the moment he walked into the room, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. The team was visibly uncomfortable, not just with the theories Henry presented, but with the man himself. A homeless physicist, sitting at the table with SpaceX's elite engineers, many of whom had spent their entire careers in academia, was a stark contrast to the usual figures who sat in these chairs. Henry adjusted his glasses, his hands slightly trembling as he pulled up his notes on the tablet in front of him. "I know this sounds outlandish," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "But the data doesn't lie. We've been seeing patterns that don't align with anything we know about our universe. These fluctuations in quantum fields, they're not random. They're a sign of something far greater, something we can barely comprehend." He gestured toward the screen, where complex graphs and quantum models were displayed. The data points zigzagged in a way that seemed random at first glance, but upon closer inspection, there was an undeniable order. One that matched the descriptions of phenomena Henry had previously detailed. The lead physicist on Elon's team, Dr. Tomas Rivera, leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "What exactly are we looking at here?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "This could be a glitch in the system. There's no basis for these patterns to exist in the way you're suggesting. If what you're saying is true, it would completely defy everything we know about physics." Henry met his gaze, his expression unshaken. "Yes, Dr. Rivera, and that's precisely the point. What we know about physics is incomplete. It's a framework we've built, but it doesn't account for everything. These fluctuations are not glitches. They are echoes, ripples from dimensions outside our own. What I'm proposing is that these fluctuations are evidence of parallel universes, universes that coexist with our own, but are invisible to us." Elon glanced at his team. He could see the doubt in their eyes, but he also saw the flicker of curiosity that they couldn't entirely suppress. These were some of the brightest minds in the world, and they were all grappling with something that defied their training and understanding. But Elon was no stranger to difficult challenges. He had faced resistance before, and this was no different. If anything, it was an even bigger leap. "Let's approach this from a different angle," Elon said, raising his hand slightly to bring everyone's attention back to him. "We all know that space travel has its limits. What we can do, where we can go, and how we get there. But if Henry's theory is correct, we might be able to overcome those limits. We might not just be talking about visiting new planets or exploring Mars. We're talking about exploring entirely new realities." There was a brief pause as the team absorbed Elon's words. The idea of parallel universes, of traveling between dimensions, sounded so far beyond their scope that it felt like the kind of idea you would hear about in a sci-fi movie, not something being discussed in a boardroom at SpaceX. And yet, Elon believed in it. Dr. Rivera, who had been silent for a while, looked up from his tablet and spoke again. "You want us to spend resources on this? On something we can't even begin to test? We're talking about bending the laws of physics. This could set us back by decades." Elon turned toward him, his gaze sharp. "I'm asking you to trust in something bigger than what we know. I'm asking you to take a leap. Yes, this is uncharted territory, but you've all spent your lives pushing boundaries. SpaceX was founded on the idea of doing what was thought impossible. This is no different. We're going to explore the unknown." He stood up and walked toward the whiteboard, where he began writing out ideas, calculations, and possible solutions. His mind was already working through the next steps, planning how to tackle what seemed like an insurmountable challenge. The uncertainty of the situation didn't faze him. It energized him. This was what he lived for, breaking through barriers, challenging what was thought to be impossible. "Let's test this scientifically," Elon continued, his voice gaining strength. "We can't ignore what Henry is suggesting. If we can prove it, if we can access these parallel dimensions, we could change everything. Energy, space exploration, communication. The possibilities are endless. We can't afford to wait for the world to catch up. We have to be the ones leading the charge." Henry's eyes met Elon's, filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. This was it, the moment when everything Henry had worked for, all the years of isolation, all the rejection from the scientific community, could finally be validated. He had the opportunity to not just prove his theories, but to take humanity into a new frontier. "All right," Dr. Rivera said after a long pause, still looking hesitant but intrigued. "Let's say you're right. Let's say these fluctuations are connected to parallel universes. How do we measure them? How do we interact with them?" Henry smiled slightly, his confidence growing. We need to build instruments that can detect these fluctuations more precisely. We need quantum computers that can handle the complexity, sensors that can capture the faintest signals from these dimensions. It won't be easy, but I believe we already have the technology to start. Elon turned back to his team. This is the start of something huge. Let's get to work. We're not going to wait for others to validate it. We're going to do it ourselves. The room was still filled with doubt, but it was slowly giving way to something else. Curiosity, excitement, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. Elon knew they had just crossed a threshold. There would be obstacles ahead, no doubt. But with this team, his team, he was confident they could overcome them. The conversation had quickly escalated. As Henry continued to present his data, the skepticism in the room grew louder. Elon could feel the tension building with every passing minute. His engineers, many of whom had worked with him for years, were starting to question everything. It wasn't that they didn't believe in innovation. They were all pioneers in their own right, after all. But Henry's theories went far beyond anything they had ever dealt with. The multiverse, parallel dimensions. These weren't just complex equations. They were fundamentally reshaping the fabric of what they understood about the universe. Elon, this is absurd. Dr. Tomas Rivera, the lead physicist, finally spoke up. We're talking about multiple universes, and you expect us to just take this man's word for it? This isn't just a theoretical problem. It's a scientific one. There's no data to back this up, no empirical evidence. We can't start building something based on a fantasy. Henry, unfazed, met Thomas's gaze with calm eyes. That's exactly the point. We're not dealing with something that fits neatly within the confines of conventional science. If we're going to find the answers, we need to be willing to step beyond the boundaries we've set for ourselves. You think I'm wrong because it doesn't fit into the standard model, but that's the problem. We're limited by our own understanding. Dr. Rivera crossed his arms, clearly frustrated. You can't just dismiss the laws of physics because they don't match your theory, Henry. We've spent decades understanding the universe through these laws. They are the foundation of everything we've built. To suggest that we abandon them without evidence is reckless. Elon watched as the tension between Henry and Tomas grew. He could see that the room was starting to split. Those who wanted to entertain Henry's radical theories, and those who wanted hard proof. The idea of believing in something untested, something that flew in the face of what they had all been taught, was a tough pill to swallow for the people who had dedicated their lives to the rigid structure of modern science. Elon stood up, his voice steady but firm. I understand the skepticism. I do. But remember what we're about here. We don't just accept things as they are. SpaceX was built on the idea that we can do things others think are impossible. So why should this be any different? He walked to the front of the room, looking out the large windows, his mind racing. This is bigger than just a new propulsion system or a better battery. This could change everything we know about the universe. And we're at the very beginning of it. So yes, we're stepping into the unknown. But sometimes, that's the only way forward. Tomas still wasn't convinced. He stood up, shaking his head. I'm not saying I don't believe in pushing boundaries. But there's a line between bold innovation and sheer recklessness. How do you propose we measure something that we've never observed? How do we prove these theories? Elon felt the frustration in his chest, but he was no stranger to being the lone believer in the room, the one person standing up for something that others thought impossible. He turned back to Henry. Tell me more. Help me see how we can begin this process. If you're right, we need to know where to start. Henry, calm as always, looked at Elon and then the rest of the team. The first step is simple. We need to find the quantum fluctuations that connect our universe to the others. It's like a frequency we can tune into, but right now, we don't have the tools to detect it accurately. That's where the technology comes in. The instruments we have now are just too crude." Thomas wasn't convinced, but Elon could see the glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. It was a small thing, but it was enough to fuel Elon. Few more days of tense discussions, late nights, and intense analysis before something shifted. Henry's theory, once dismissed as a fantastical idea, had begun to show signs of plausibility. The data they had collected from their initial tests didn't just support his claims, it hinted at something much deeper, something beyond even what Henry had predicted. Elon had always been a dreamer, but he was also a realist. The excitement of the new project was starting to clash with the gravity of what they were discovering. This wasn't just about proving a theory. It was about doing something that could alter the course of human history. And the pressure of that weight was starting to feel overwhelming. It happened late one evening, after hours of staring at the glowing screens filled with numbers and waveforms. Henry, who had been pacing nervously for hours, suddenly stopped. His eyes locked onto the data streaming in real time from the quantum detectors. For a moment, it seemed like the world had stopped. "Elon, look at this," Henry said, his voice almost trembling. Elon moved quickly to the display, his heart pounding. The data was flashing in ways they hadn't seen before. It was subtle at first, a small shift in the readings, but as he zoomed in on the fluctuations, something clicked. "What is this?" Elon asked, almost breathless. Henry's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "It's the breakthrough. This pattern. This isn't just random noise. It's a signal." Elon stared at the screen. The fluctuations they had been tracking for days had formed a coherent structure. Not only were they observing these quantum anomalies, but the fluctuations seemed purposeful. They were aligned in a way that suggested intentionality, a form of communication or even a pathway from another dimension. Elon turned to Henry, a mix of awe and disbelief in his eyes. "You're saying we've detected a signal from another dimension?" Henry nodded slowly, his expression serious. "It's not just a theory anymore. This is real. We've been tracking these fluctuations for weeks, and now we're seeing something we can't explain with our current understanding of physics. This signal, it's too organized to be a coincidence. We're not just looking at noise anymore. We're looking at a bridge." Elon's mind raced. This was no longer just an idea, it was tangible. They had found a way to connect with something outside their own dimension, something that lay beyond their understanding. He had always believed in pushing the limits of possibility, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. "Henry, do you realize what this means?" Elon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We could be standing on the edge of the greatest discovery in human history." Henry's eyes were wide, his mind just beginning to catch up to the implications. "Yes. We could open a doorway to an entirely new world, a world of knowledge, energy, resources, things we can't even begin to fathom." But as the excitement grew, Elon felt a nagging sense of caution. There was something deeply unsettling about what they were witnessing. Yes, it was groundbreaking. Yes, it was unprecedented, but it was also unknown. What if this signal was more than they bargained for? What if they opened a door to something that wasn't ready to be discovered? "Are we sure we're ready for this?" Elon asked, his voice steady, but the weight of the question pressing on him. "What if we're not prepared for what we might find?" Henry paused, his gaze shifting to the screens. The signal was still there, pulsing, alive with potential. "We're never truly ready for the unknown, Elon," he said quietly. But this is our chance to change everything. Elon took a deep breath, his decision forming with the clarity that had always come to him in moments of uncertainty. Then let's do it. Let's make it happen. The atmosphere in the conference room was thick with anticipation as Elon, Henry, and the rest of the SpaceX team gathered around the central screen. Data from the latest experiment, one that had taken days to set up, was streaming in rapidly. Henry was pacing beside the large monitor, his eyes locked on the flashing numbers. The rest of the room was still, as if holding its breath, waiting for the results. Elon stood at the front, hands folded across his chest, his mind running through all the implications. "Henry," Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper, "are we ready for this?" Henry's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he prepared to initiate the final sequence. "We've never been closer. I can feel it, Elon. The fluctuations are becoming more defined. They're more than just random. This is it." Elon didn't respond immediately. His thoughts swirled with a mix of excitement and apprehension. His company, his entire career, had been built on defying the impossible. But this was a whole new level. They weren't just sending rockets into space anymore or building electric cars to change the world's energy. This was about altering the fabric of reality itself. What if they succeeded? What if they failed? The countdown on the screen began. Henry was about to activate the final component of their machine, the device designed to detect and measure the quantum fluctuations they had been studying for weeks. They had painstakingly calibrated every piece, using the most advanced technology available, but the risks were immense. If the machine worked as Henry predicted, they could be opening a doorway to another dimension, a doorway that had been hidden, perhaps for a reason. As the seconds ticked down, the room fell into complete silence. Every scientist in the room held their breath. The only sound was the soft hum of the machine as it powered up. Henry reached out and pressed the button. Immediately, a pulse of energy rippled across the screen. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. The machine hummed louder, the lights flickering in sync with the pulse. Then, a low vibration spread through the room, and the air itself seemed to thicken. "What is it?" Tomas Rivera asked, his voice shaking with excitement. Elon's heart raced as he watched the data on the screen. The fluctuations they had been tracking had exploded in intensity, the patterns now clear and unmistakable. There was no doubt, this was real. The quantum fluctuations had stabilized, creating a pattern that resembled something almost like a map. Elon's eyes widened. It's a star map," he said, barely able to contain his amazement. "We're seeing it. We're seeing a map of stars from another dimension." The room was still for a moment. Then, as the map continued to form, they realized the magnitude of what they were seeing. The stars were not static. They moved, orbiting one another, shifting and rearranging in ways that seemed intentional. It wasn't just a star map, it was a living, breathing representation of a parallel universe. Henry stepped forward, eyes wide with awe. "We've done it, Elon. This is it. This is a map of a reality that exists alongside ours. It's not just a theory anymore. It's real. We can reach it." Elon looked around the room, his team of scientists standing in awe. He could see the skepticism in their eyes, but it was slowly being replaced by a shared sense of wonder. The machine had proven it. They had bridged the gap between their reality and another. But there was something else. A deep, unsettling feeling tugged at Elon's gut. It wasn't fear exactly. It was a recognition that they had opened a door. And that door led to an unknown, uncharted world. "Are we ready for this?" Elon asked again, but this time his voice was more somber. "What if we're not prepared for what's on the other side?" Henry turned to him, his face serious. "We can't go back now, Elon. We've seen the map. We've seen the evidence. This is a chance to change everything, to change humanity's place in the universe." Elon exhaled slowly. "I'm not sure if we're ready for what we might find, but I know we have to try." The tension was palpable as the team absorbed the revelation. They were at the edge of a new world, one that held more answers than they could ever hope to understand. But to truly open that door, they needed to take the next step. As the excitement from the breakthrough settled, a sense of urgency filled the room. Elon stood at the front, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. They had just made the first tangible connection to another dimension, a parallel universe. But now they had to make a choice. Do they proceed with the next steps, knowing that they could be playing with forces they didn't yet fully understand? Or do they pull back, retreat, and continue with what they know? Elon looked at his team, his gaze lingering on each of them. The room was filled with uncertainty, but there was also a flicker of hope in their eyes. They had just witnessed a glimpse into something unimaginable, and that was both terrifying and exhilarating. But they all knew that this moment could change everything. One wrong move, one mistake, and the consequences could be disastrous. "Listen," Elon began, his voice steady. "What we've just seen is a doorway to something far beyond anything we could have ever dreamed of. The data is clear. We're looking at a new frontier, but we can't afford to rush in. We need to proceed cautiously, systematically. We don't know what lies on the other side." Henry stepped forward, his expression determined. "You're right, Elon. But we can't stop now. We've already seen the patterns. This map, it's not just stars, it's an invitation to explore, to discover. We have the tools now to learn what's on the other side, and we can't let fear hold us back." Elon nodded, feeling the weight of Henry's words. He had always known that the biggest breakthroughs came with risks, but this felt different. This wasn't just about reaching the stars. It was about stepping into the unknown and asking questions that might change humanity forever. He turned to his team. "We'll continue with the tests, but we'll do it methodically. We'll measure everything, document everything, and we'll only proceed when we know exactly what we're dealing with. We'll bring in more resources, bring in the best minds. We can't afford any mistakes." The team, once skeptical, now nodded in agreement. The excitement in the room was palpable, but so was the seriousness of their task. They were no longer just working on a space project. They were stepping into the realms of the unknown. As the team began preparing for the next phase, Elon stepped outside the conference room, his mind racing. This was it. The next frontier was no longer just a dream. It was a reality, waiting to be explored. In the quiet of the hallway, he paused for a moment, looking out the window at the stars. A sense of awe washed over him. They were standing on the edge of something monumental, something that could change the very course of human history. But even as the possibilities danced in his mind, Elon knew that they had to move. The window did little to break the calm inside. Elon stood in front of his desk, staring at the screen filled with the latest data from Henry's experiment. The figures on the screen blinked and flickered, shifting erratically as the fluctuations they had been tracking grew more intense by the hour. It was the kind of data that he had hoped to see. Yet the uncertainty still loomed over him. They had crossed a line between theory and reality. But now, more than ever, Elon felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. It skipped a beat. He had already sensed something was different. The atmosphere around the lab had shifted in the last few days. The energy surrounding the project was electric, but so was the undercurrent of fear. They were on the verge of a breakthrough, but at what cost? Without a word, Elon followed her out of his office, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. As they walked through the quiet hallways of SpaceX's advanced research facility, his thoughts circled back to Henry's theories. The discovery of parallel universes, the quantum fluctuations they were tracking, everything seemed to be converging into something greater than he could have ever imagined. When they arrived at the central lab, the room was filled with a buzz of activity. The team was huddled around the monitors, eyes glued to the data streaming in. The machine, the one they had built to detect the quantum anomalies, was pulsing with energy. It had been steadily humming for hours, but now it had become erratic, almost alive. "Elon," Henry said, turning toward him. There was a sharpness in his voice that Elon had never heard before. Henry's usual calm demeanor was replaced by something else, a mixture of excitement and fear. "This isn't just a fluctuation. It's something else." Elon approached the main screen, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The data wasn't just random anymore. It wasn't the noise they had seen before. It was organized, structured. There was a clear pattern emerging, one that was unmistakable. For a brief moment, everything else in the room faded away as Elon focused on the screen in front of him. The fluctuations, the quantum waves they had been measuring for weeks, were no longer small anomalies. They were cascading into something much bigger, a signal that was taking form. "What is that?" Elon's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Is that a map?" Henry stepped closer, his eyes glued to the screen. "Yes, it's more than just a pattern. It's a network, a map of parallel universes, or at least part of it. What we're seeing here is a reflection of what lies beyond the limits of our reality." The room fell silent. The team had been analyzing data for days, working tirelessly to get to this point. But now they were facing something they could not ignore. A realization began to dawn on them. What they had been seeking, the very thing that could change humanity's understanding of the universe, was staring them in the face. Elon's mind raced, but his focus never wavered from the screen. "This could be it," he said, his voice quiet, but filled with awe. "This could be the key to everything. New technologies, new energy sources, everything we've ever dreamed of." The hum of the machine grew louder, vibrating through the room as the map on the screen became clearer. There were shifting points, like stars, connecting in ways that defied logic. It wasn't just a celestial map. It was a map of connections, links between dimensions, a network that bridged the gap between their reality and an infinite number of others. For a moment, Elon allowed himself to feel the weight of what was happening. They had just discovered something that could rewrite everything. But then, the rush of excitement was tempered by a wave of uncertainty. "But what does this mean?" Elon asked, looking around the room at his team. "We don't know what we're dealing with. We could be on the brink of something that's far beyond our control. What if we open a doorway to something that we can't close?" Henry, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen, looked back at Elon. "We can't ignore this, Elon. If we don't do something with it, someone else will. This is the future, whether we like it or not." Elon knew Henry was right. The possibilities were endless. They could access knowledge, energy, and technology from parallel dimensions, things that were beyond their wildest imaginations. But with that potential came enormous risk. What if the machine they had built wasn't just opening doors to new worlds? What if it was opening a door to something much darker, something they couldn't control? The conference room at SpaceX was unusually quiet, a stark contrast to the energy that usually filled the air. The whiteboard on one side of the room was covered with equations and notes from the previous meetings, theories about quantum mechanics and the multiverse written in the chaotic shorthand that Elon had used for years. But today, the mood was different. The team was tense, on edge, and their focus was unwavering. They were standing on the precipice of something far beyond what anyone had imagined, a discovery that could change the course of human history. Elon, dressed in his usual black t-shirt and jeans, stood near the window, staring out at the sprawling city of Los Angeles. His thoughts were a swirl of excitement and apprehension. The news from Henry and the team had shaken him to his core. For the first time in years, he felt a deep uncertainty about what lay ahead. They were pushing the boundaries of science and technology, but the magnitude of their work was becoming apparent. The very nature of reality itself was at stake, and that realization wasn't something you could easily process. Behind him, Henry was seated at the table, flipping through his notebook filled with diagrams and equations. His face was hard to read, a mixture of nervous excitement and guarded hope. The data they had gathered over the past few weeks was undeniably groundbreaking, and he knew that they were on the verge of proving something that had eluded scientists for centuries. But Henry also knew that this kind of discovery came with a weight, one that could have dangerous implications if they weren't careful. As Elon turned from the window, his eyes scanning the room, he saw the faces of his team. Each one was lost in their own thoughts, but there was a shared sense of urgency in the air. The engineers, the scientists, all of them had been part of monumental projects before, space missions, the development of sustainable energy, and more. But this was different. They were about to make a leap into the unknown, and not all of them were comfortable with the idea. Dr. Thomas Rivera, the lead physicist, was pacing near the back of the room, his arms crossed tightly as he reviewed the data on the large screen at the front. His brow furrowed in concentration. Thomas was one of the brightest minds on Elon's team, but he wasn't one for taking risks. He had always believed in proving theories with data, with results that could be measured and tested. And what Henry was suggesting went far beyond anything that could be easily measured. "This doesn't make sense," Thomas muttered to himself, tapping his pen on the edge of the table. If what Henry is suggesting is true, then everything we know about physics, everything we've worked our entire careers for, might be wrong. Elon could hear the strain in Thomas's voice. It was the same skepticism he had seen when SpaceX first began challenging the traditional aerospace industry. But this time, the stakes felt even higher. This wasn't just about proving a new rocket design or optimizing an electric car. This was about understanding the very structure of the universe itself. Henry stood up slowly, his posture unwavering, and turned to face the group. He had known this moment would come, the moment when his work would either be accepted or dismissed as madness. The weight of the room's skepticism hung in the air, but Henry didn't flinch. "I understand your doubts," Henry said, his voice steady but firm. "I've been through this before. I've spent years watching people dismiss the very ideas that could change everything. But the data doesn't lie. We've been tracking these fluctuations for weeks, and they've been growing stronger. They're not random. They're part of something much bigger, something that exists outside of our reality." Elon watched as his team exchanged skeptical glances. The tension in the room deepened. Everyone had a million questions, and no one was ready to take the leap. Elon felt the pressure mounting. They were on the verge of a discovery that could change the course of humanity, but the path forward was unclear. Could they really trust the data? Could they trust Henry? "We're asking for more than just belief here, Henry," Thomas said, his voice growing more strained. "This is more than theoretical physics. This is real-world science. We need something tangible. We need results." Henry nodded, his expression serious. "I understand. But what you're asking for is impossible. We can't measure what we haven't learned to look for. You want data. The data is right here, in front of us, but it's not something we're used to seeing. It's not something we can quantify with the tools we have now. That's why we need new technology. We need to build something that can interact with these dimensions." Elon looked around the room. The skepticism was palpable, but so was the spark of curiosity. He had led SpaceX to some of its greatest successes by following his instincts, by defying convention. This was no different. But this wasn't about rockets or Mars. It was about stepping into the unknown, into the very fabric of reality itself. The lead engineer, Maria, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "What if we're wrong? What if we open a door we can't close?" Elon turned to her, meeting her eyes. "Then we'll deal with it. We have no choice but to try. If we don't, someone else will. And they won't have the same control we do." The room grew quieter. The scientists exchanged uneasy glances. They knew that once they committed to this, there was no turning back. But Elon's words hung in the air, a rallying cry for the boldest among them. There were risks, certainly, but there were also unimaginable possibilities. And those possibilities were something Elon Musk had always chased. "This is our chance to do something that will change the world," Elon said, his voice rising with conviction. "We've never been afraid to break new ground. This is no different." As the team began to gather around the screen, reviewing the data once more, Elon turned to Henry. There was a glimmer of something in Henry's eyes. Hope, yes, but also the faintest trace of fear. He knew what this meant. But in that moment, he was ready. Ready to take the leap, no matter what came next. Elon extended his hand. "Let's do this, together." Henry smiled, his heart swelling with the realization that he had finally found someone who believed in him, someone who was willing to risk everything for the future. He took Elon's hand, their partnership now sealed. "Together," he repeated. And just like that, they crossed the threshold into the unknown. The excitement in the room was palpable, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The data from the quantum fluctuations had revealed a pattern so significant that it felt like a door to the unknown had just cracked open. But that door led to a place that no one in the room fully understood, let alone had the tools or experience to navigate. There was a palpable sense of uncertainty as the team processed the implications of what they were seeing. Elon stood in front of the massive screen, staring at the data, the map. A living, shifting constellation of points that connected various dimensions, was mesmerizing. The quantum fluctuations were no longer erratic. They had formed a distinct, organized structure. Henry had been right. This was no mere theoretical exercise. This was something real. But as Elon absorbed the data, the weight of the situation hit him. They weren't just on the brink of an extraordinary discovery. They were on the verge of a leap into the unknown. And that leap came with risks far greater than anything they had encountered before. "Look at these readings," Tomas Rivera, the lead physicist, said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We've never seen anything like this before. If what Henry's saying is true, this map could be more than just a signal. It could be a doorway to another reality. But how do we know that it's safe? How do we know we're not opening a door to something dangerous?" The question lingered in the air, and a wave of tension swept through the room. Elon could feel the weight of the concern in Tomas's voice. and it was a sentiment that echoed in the minds of everyone present. The quantum fluctuations they had been tracking were no longer just theoretical. They were real, measurable, and had now begun to form a coherent pattern that was undeniably tied to something beyond their understanding. Tomas was right. They had no way of knowing what they were about to uncover. They could be on the verge of a historic breakthrough, or they could be opening a Pandora's box, something they couldn't control. The risk was immense, and the stakes were higher than ever. Henry, standing next to the screen, felt the tension building, but he wasn't backing down. "I understand the fear, Tomas. Believe me, I've lived with it for years," he said, his voice steady. "But we can't let fear stop us now. This is bigger than all of us. What we're seeing isn't just a signal, it's a connection. It's the first step toward understanding something that's been hidden from us for all of human history." Elon turned to face Henry. There was a sharpness in his eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. It was the look of someone who had finally allowed themselves to believe, fully and without reservation, in the possibility of the impossible. "But do we really know what this means?" he asked, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're dealing with something that could change everything, and it's not just science. It's humanity's place in the universe." Henry didn't flinch. "Yes, it could change everything. But we're here for a reason, Elon. We've built this company on the belief that we can do what others think is impossible. And this is no different. We can make this a reality, but we have to take the risk. We can't keep waiting for someone else to step up." Elon's eyes locked onto Henry's, and for a moment, the weight of their shared responsibility settled between them. They were standing at the threshold of something far greater than they could have ever imagined. And yet, there was a part of Elon that hesitated, that couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were venturing too far. "We have to be cautious," Elon said, his voice quieter but resolute. "If we open this door, if we push forward without understanding the full consequences, we might be playing with forces we don't understand. We can't be reckless." "I'm not asking you to be reckless," Henry replied, his voice calm but insistent. "I'm asking you to trust the data, to trust the science. We have to move forward. Slowly, carefully, but we have to move forward. We've been given a glimpse of something incredible, Elon. This is humanity's chance to step beyond the boundaries of our understanding." Elon looked at Henry, and for the first time, he felt the gravity of the decision settle fully upon him. This wasn't just about innovation or technology, it was about something far more profound. This could change the future of the human race, or it could lead them into a danger that no one was prepared for. Turning to his team, Elon addressed the room, his voice steady. "We've always prided ourselves on pushing boundaries at SpaceX, but this is different. We need to be smart. We need to approach this with the same boldness we've had, but with the caution that this isn't just another project. This could change everything." He could see the uncertainty in his team's eyes. Some of them were still processing what they had seen, what they had just witnessed. The map on the screen, the patterns, the connection to alternate realities. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. But even with that excitement, the fear of the unknown lingered. Maria, one of the senior engineers, stood up from her seat, her face pale. "Elon, this could be dangerous. We've spent years perfecting rockets, working with cutting-edge technology, but this is unknown. We could be opening a door we can't close. The risks." "I know the risks," Elon interrupted, his voice firm. "But if we don't take them, someone else will. We've already made history. But this could be something even bigger. I'm not asking you to jump blindly. I'm asking you to take a step forward, knowing that we have a responsibility to see this through." The room was silent for a moment. No one spoke. The weight of Elon's words settled over them all, and they knew the choice they faced. There would be no going back once they started. But as the silence stretched on, something shifted. The skepticism remained, but so did a glimmer of hope. A glimmer of belief that they were on the verge of a discovery that could change everything. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice more subdued than before. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. No shortcuts. We test, we measure, and we proceed with caution. But we do it together." Elon nodded. "Agreed. Together." The room felt as though it had been frozen in time. The hum of the machine filled the silence, the steady pulse of energy vibrating through the walls. Elon, Henry, and the team stood still, their eyes fixed on the data that was unfolding before them on the large screens. The map, the complex web of quantum fluctuations, was no longer just a theoretical pattern or an abstract concept. It had materialized into something they could no longer ignore. The map wasn't static. It was dynamic, pulsing with energy, shifting and rearranging like a living thing. Henry's breath quickened as he looked at the screen, his hands shaking slightly. The fluctuations in the quantum field had formed a shape, a structure, an organized network of interconnected points that resembled a star map. But unlike any star map they had ever seen, this one seemed to be alive. The points moved, rearranged, and formed new patterns, almost as if the map was trying to tell them something. This is it," Henry said, his voice barely above a whisper, but full of awe. "This is a map of multiple dimensions. It's not just random noise anymore. It's a real, quantifiable structure." Elon's heart raced as he absorbed the data. The machine was not just picking up fluctuations, it was connecting them, pulling them together into a visible representation of alternate realities. But even as he marveled at the discovery, a deep unease began to settle in his stomach. The implications of what they were seeing were far beyond anything they had expected. They weren't just uncovering a theory, they were opening a doorway to something that might be beyond their control. "Henry," Elon said, his voice quiet but laced with intensity, This isn't just a map of stars. It's a network, a grid, a direct connection to parallel dimensions. But how do we know it's real? How do we know we're not just seeing a random pattern?" Henry looked at him, his expression both determined and filled with excitement. "I've been studying this for years, Elon. I knew this moment would come. The patterns we're seeing, they're too organized, too consistent. This isn't random. The data is speaking to us. We've tapped into something bigger than us." Elon turned to the team, watching their reactions. The room was still, but the energy had shifted. There was disbelief in some eyes, awe in others. The scientific minds in the room had spent their lives working with theories, with equations. But what Henry and Elon were showing them was something tangible, something that went beyond their training, beyond their understanding. This wasn't just an academic exercise. This was a real, provable connection to another reality. Maria, one of SpaceX's senior engineers, stepped forward, her face pale. "But if this is true, if what we're seeing is a connection to another dimension, how do we even begin to interact with it? How do we access it? What happens next?" The question hung in the air, a new wave of fear washing over the room. What if they were opening a door they couldn't close? What if the map, the fluctuations, were leading them to something dangerous? Something they weren't prepared for? Henry took a deep breath, sensing the growing fear in the room. "We don't have all the answers yet," he said, "but we know one thing. We've connected to something real. This isn't just theoretical anymore. We can't unsee this, and we can't ignore it." Elon paced in front of the team, his thoughts racing. The discovery was a dream come true, a scientist's ultimate breakthrough. But the responsibility of what they were about to do weighed heavily on him. He had always pushed for the impossible, but this was different. This wasn't about building rockets or electric cars. This was about stepping into the unknown, into something that might challenge the very fabric of space and time. He turned back to Henry, his mind still spinning. What happens if we go further? If we try to tap into this? What could we unleash? Henry looked at him, his face serious now. I don't know what's on the other side, Elon, but I do know this. If we don't try, we'll never know. This isn't just about science, it's about humanity's future. We've found a connection, and it's up to us to decide what to do with it. There was a long pause. Elon took a deep breath, his eyes locked on the screen, watching as the map continued to shift and change. The data was overwhelming, and yet it was beautiful. The potential was limitless, but the risks were enormous. We're standing at the edge of something incredible, Elon said finally, his voice steady but filled with resolve. But we need to understand it. We need to move forward with caution. I won't risk everything on an idea alone. We need to test this, measure it, and only proceed when we have a clear understanding of what we're dealing with. Henry nodded slowly. I agree, but the clock is ticking, Elon. The longer we wait, the more we risk someone else discovering this. We've come this far. We can't stop now. Elon turned to his team, his expression serious. We move forward, but we do it carefully. We'll need the best minds, the best technology. We'll gather more data, but we'll do it methodically. This is just the beginning. The atmosphere in the room was electric, but at the same time, suffocating. Every single person in the room knew they were standing at the edge of something monumental. The machine hummed with power, a low vibration that resonated through the floor beneath their feet. The fluctuations on the screen had stabilized into an unmistakable pattern, one that Henry had been predicting for years, and now it was happening before their eyes. A direct connection to parallel universes, a bridge between dimensions, had been established. But as the data continued to display more intricate and complex information, the weight of it settled in. Is this really happening? Tomas Rivera, the lead physicist, asked in disbelief, his voice trembling. His usual certainty was gone, replaced by a mixture of awe and fear. We've always theorized about parallel universes, but this is something completely different. How do we even begin to understand this? How do we control it? Elon turned from the monitor, his face tight with determination. We don't control it, Tomas. Not yet. But we will study it, carefully. We have to understand what we're dealing with before we make any decisions. This is beyond anything we've ever worked on. But if Henry is right, we're standing at the threshold of something that could change the future of everything. Henry's voice broke through the tension, calm but intense. This is what we've been waiting for. The data doesn't lie. This is the key. We're not just looking at a map. We're looking at a pathway to other realities. A chance to communicate, to access the knowledge and resources beyond our dimension. Elon turned back to the screen, his eyes scanning the map that continued to shift, evolving before him. The stars, the connections between them, were not just random. Each one seemed to pulse with energy. It was like a living, breathing entity, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. But Elon's mind was divided. There was a deep sense of excitement, yes, but also a growing unease. They had opened the door to something far beyond their understanding, and while the possibilities were infinite, so were the dangers. What happens if we try to enter one of these dimensions? Maria, one of the senior engineers, asked. Her voice carried a thread of concern. What if we trigger something we can't control? What if it's not as harmless as it seems? Elon paused, his eyes fixed on the map. The fear in Maria's voice echoed in his own mind, but he pushed it aside. The excitement was too powerful to ignore. This was what he had always dreamed of, pushing humanity beyond its limits. He wasn't going to turn back now. "We take it one step at a time," Elon said, his voice firm. "We measure. We test." "Elon, I know the risks, but we've already opened the door. The map is clear. If we're going to do this, we need to move forward. We can't wait for others to catch up. The world is going to be different after this." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. There was no going back. The door had been opened, and there was no telling what lay on the other side. It wasn't just about exploring a new frontier. It was about the unknown, the untouchable, the things that could be waiting for them beyond the veil of their own dimension. The room seemed to hold its breath, the quiet hum of the machine echoing in their minds. "I'm in," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "Let's move forward, but we do this carefully. We will explore the possibilities, but we take every precaution. We're not just dealing with physics here, we're dealing with the unknown, and we need to be ready for whatever we find." The rest of the team nodded, their faces set with determination. This was no longer just a scientific experiment. It was a journey into the unknown, a journey that would change everything. The days that followed were filled with frenetic activity. The team, now fully committed to the project, worked tirelessly to refine their instruments, develop new tools, and make the necessary adjustments to their equipment. What they had discovered was unlike anything they had ever anticipated, and every new piece of data they gathered pushed them further down a path they had never imagined. The energy in the lab was intense. They were on the verge of something groundbreaking, but the stakes were higher than ever. Elon's leadership, usually unwavering, was tempered now with caution. Every decision was weighed carefully. He couldn't afford to be reckless. They were stepping into a world of uncharted science, and there was no roadmap. The unknown was both terrifying and exhilarating. Henry, too, was driven, more so than ever before. The thrill of proving his theories was tempered with the realization of what they were dealing with. He had always believed in his work, but now, with Elon's unwavering support, they were about to break through to something that could change everything. The possibilities were endless, but so were the risks. As the final pieces of the machine were put into place, Elon stood at the back of the lab watching his team work. The data on the screens seemed to grow more intricate with every passing moment, revealing patterns, connections, and anomalies that no one had predicted. The quantum fluctuations were intensifying, becoming more defined, more connected. It was as if they were pulling themselves together, forming had already been made. They had come too far to stop now. Henry stood beside him, watching the team's progress. His eyes were alight with anticipation. "We're close, Elon. Closer than I ever thought possible." Elon nodded, but his mind was still racing with the implications. "Once we activate this, there's no going back. We're opening a door to another world." "I know," Henry replied, his voice tinged with both excitement and fear. "But that's the point, isn't it? We've always known that humanity has to take risks to grow. This is the risk of a lifetime." The machine powered up, and the energy in the room shifted. The quantum readings on the monitors fluctuated, and a low hum filled the air as the machine came online. The fluctuations they had been measuring for weeks suddenly aligned, and the data on the screen took form. A map appeared, a representation of a network of dimensions, of worlds connected through the fabric of space and time. As the map continued to unfold, the machine pulsed with energy, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. It was as if they were standing at the threshold of something extraordinary, something that had been waiting for them, hidden just beyond the limits of human understanding. "This is it," Elon said, his voice thick with awe. "We've done it. We've opened the door." Henry nodded slowly, his face a mixture of wonder and fear. "It's more than I ever imagined. The possibilities, we can explore them, but we have to be careful." Elon turned to his team, his eyes locking with each of them. "We move forward together," he said, "but we take it step by step. We're not just exploring another dimension, we're exploring the very fabric of reality. We have to be ready for whatever comes next." As the machine continued to hum, Elon felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. This was just the beginning. What lay beyond the doorway they had opened could be more than they were prepared for. But they were going to face it, head on. And together they would uncover the greatest discovery in human history,